So if you have questions, I am delighted to take them. And thank you for your kind attention. Yes. So why don't you say your name and where you're from?
My name is Dylan Clark, and I'm from Fort Collins, Colorado. Michele Bachmann, being such a proponent of a pro-life candidate, would you pledge to contribute to PEPFAR and maintain the funding, something Barack Obama has not done?
PEPFAR is something that I was a part of when I was in the United States. Congress, we did send money to PEPFAR. Right now, our problem is the overspending. It will have to be a part of the entire budget. Every part of the budget will be up for grabs. All nations need to contribute to PEPFAR. And again, this is dealing with AIDS funding. All nations to be a part of this, not just the United States. For years, the United States has been the #1 contributor to relieving poverty and to programs that benefit people across the world. If we can do it, we will do it. But our problem right now is overspending. Again, if we have to go to countries like China and borrow 43 cents of every dollar that we have, it's very difficult for us to continue to spend that kind of money. The only way that you can be benevolent and compassionate is to spend out of your abundance, your overage. For your family, for my family, we can't borrow money on compassion. We have to spend the money that we earn. Right now, we're not following that model. Right now, we're in a tremendous problem. So I can't guarantee that that will continue to go on, but it's something that the nation will have to consider. So thank you for asking that question. The good news is we've made substantial strides in that area. And because of the United States making a profound commitment to finding new cures for AIDS, we have found drugs that have gone a long way toward ending the suffering for a lot of people. And that's one thing that I want to continue is research on many different diseases to relieve suffering.
Michele, our next question comes from Carter.
Thank you, Madam Representative. Just quickly, about your view of the Constitution, I'm just curious on one thing. You indicated, correct me if I'm wrong, of course, but that the founders held that the powers of government should be limited to those that are enumerated, correct? However, Representative, I am curious how that fits into, say, the political split that existed at the time between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans, specifically the fact that the founders themselves could not agree whether or not powers of government should be limited to only those enumerated in the Constitution, or whether there is a wider degree of interpretation for that. I'm curious as to your views on that, Representative.
Well, my opinion is that the Congress made it very clear that they had just overthrown a tyrant, and they paid a tremendous price for tyranny. And so what they wanted was a government that would work, that was large enough to work, but yet one that wouldn't strangle their lives again, like they had been strangled with King George. And trust me, they went to war over a Stamp Act. And so they were willing to go to war over that. We're in a much different situation today. And while it's difficult to find agreement, certainly Washington, D.C. proves that today. It's no different today as it was then. They did agree that the United States Congress should be limited and enumerated in its powers. And that's why the Congress, I believe, needs to devolve many of these responsibilities that can't afford anymore back to the states. The states can decide if they want to continue these programs or not. Thank you for asking that question.
So, yeah.
And again, that's Article 1 of the Constitution that describes the specific powers that Congress has. Those that Congress does not have are reserved to the states and then to you as individual citizens.
Michele, our next question comes from Anna.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, Michele. Thank you for coming. My question, you stated that you're a protector of life. I'm a woman who's been sexually assaulted. 1 in 4 women in their lifetime will be sexually assaulted. I have an acquaintance, and I think her story really speaks to people. She was raped. She was sexually assaulted throughout her life by a neighbor. And then on her 16th birthday, she was raped by her brother's friend. On her 18th birthday, she passed out and woke up to the man raping her. She went to a hospital to get help, to get herself checked out. She couldn't afford the rape kit, and so she was denied. She went to a Planned Parenthood to get checked for STDs because that was the only center that she could go to. They denied her as well because she couldn't prove her residency. And then at that point, she was, struggling with so much. She called the suicide helpline. Their funding had been cut so much that she was put on a waiting list for a suicide helpline. I guess, how do you trying to protect women's lives. I mean, don't you place a value on that as well?
Well, of course, and so do our laws. We believe very clearly that all life is precious, no matter who. And I'm terribly sorry for what you have gone through yourself personally. That's a tragedy. No one should have to go through that. That's why I believe that we vigorously have to enforce laws dealing with rape. And I think that this is not something that we should take lightly. This is something that's extremely serious, that we need to talk about, to let people know that this is not acceptable. This is a criminal act, it's a violent act, and we need to hold the perpetrators to the fullest extent of the law liable for their heinous actions. These are terrible actions that have profound effects on the lifetime of a woman. Now, the girl that you spoke of has gone through unspeakable tragedy, terrible tragedy. And that's why I'm grateful that all across Iowa I visited pro-life centers that don't turn anyone away. They don't have to prove anything. At pro-life centers, women can come in, they can have kits, they can come in and get tested, and they will find care and protection. The pro-life centers that I have gone to not only provide testing for women, they try to find jobs for women, they try to provide clothing for them, ongoing counseling, protection for them. Because it isn't just a physical matter, it's an emotional matter. And it has potential to scar them for years. And so they try to be there to be a friend and help. And so I believe that we do protect life from conception until natural death. And that's what I plan to do as President of the United States. Thank you for asking that question. I'm terribly sorry about what you've endured.
All right, Congresswoman, the next question comes here from Andrea.
Hi, Congresswoman, thank you for coming. You talked about job killing regulations, and you talked about fair competition in the free market, but I'm just curious, how is this done with a small government? And I asked that specifically in regards to energy. So you talked about utilizing America's energy resources. I absolutely agree with that, but I just, worry that without the proper regulations in place, that we're going to have more disasters. Like, for example, two that we had in April of last year, the coal mine explosion, which killed about 30 people in West Virginia, and the BP oil spill, which now moved. So how do we use those resources? Natural gas is one that's been, very much talked about recently. How do we do that without regulation? How do we protect our land, air, and water?
Well, we certainly do have regulation, and they aren't going to all go away. But part of the problem has been that we have layers of regulation. So much so that the regulations conflict with one another, and businesses don't even know how to comply. They can be out of compliance with the state and not the feds, or they can be out of compliance with the feds and not the state. And so we have layers upon layers upon layers of bureaucracy. And that's why we have 50 EPAs. And I think it's important that we let the states be the primary driver of their local EPA laws, not the federal government. I think that's the states that need to enforce those laws. So I think we need to devolve that responsibility down to the states, let them handle it. The federal government does have a place on a case-by-case basis, certainly dealing with our waters. That's something that the federal government needs to deal with. Certainly in international waters, we need to be involved in those disputes and on issues between the states. But the federal government shouldn't be the ones who are the first resort when it comes to these rules. This needs to be handled primarily by the states.
Representative Bachmann, we have Matt over here who has a question.
Hey, Matt.
Thank you, Representative Bachmann. You talked a lot about economic reform and more specifically reform of the tax code. And other candidates in the race have come out with tax plans and tax percentages and numbers to both federal and corporate tax rates. Do you have any specifics as far as tax rates for your plan?